You go ahead and take it away, Lindsay. Thank you.
Sounds good. I have all the like things open on my computer, and so I had to figure out how to get myself off of mute. Hi, everybody. I would love to see smiling faces, so please feel free to share your video because this is really just going to be about a good conversation and things that I've learned kind of along the way. So my name is Lindsay Jonas, and I am currently the Director of Professional Development Partnerships and Planning for Illinois ASPA. And prior to that, I was an assistant superintendent for human resources. I was an assistant superintendent for teaching and learning in the sixth largest district in the state of Illinois. And so when I got to my district years ago, I inherited the induction and mentoring program. And the first year, just like any new administrator, that you do a lot of like watching and learning because planning had already been done. And then I did a lot of listening and asking for feedback and those sorts of things throughout that time. And then went about, a few years worth of revamping what our whole induction and mentoring program looked like. And so I'm excited to share some of those things here with you today. So let's talk a little bit about our agenda for our next amazing 57 minutes or so together. At any point in time, if you've got questions, just hop off of mute or throw something in the chat. I'm happy to share resources, answer questions, those sorts of things. It's such a intimate group that I think we can do that. So I'm going to talk about just a little bit about mentoring models and models for mentoring programs and see kind of what genius we already have in the room. Talk a little bit about how we went through that revamping process in the district where I was working, and really starting with that end in mind to figure out, okay, what steps do I need to take in order to get everybody what they need? Talk about how we trained our mentors, how we went about training our proteges and connecting people, and then tie up with some loose ends. So that's going to kind of go through our time here together. So that being said, take a quick moment to read through this. I'm going to ask for some feedback on like what connections you're making to that. Now's the time for some audience participation. So like when you read that, what are you thinking? Without a mentor, nearly 1 in 3 new teachers leave by their 5th year. But with a mentor, that ratio drops in more than half.
You have a quiet group.
I sure do. I mean, it's after lunch, so maybe everybody had a turkey sandwich for lunch and they're sleeping.
There you go.
Well, I'm driving, so I apologize if there's background noise, but
thanks, Carrie. Don't get in an accident.
No, that's okay. It makes me think about the importance of relationships when it comes to building relationships, when it comes to bringing people into organizations and building support structures.
Thank you for that. Anybody else? All right. So I'm interested to hear what are some current models that you all are using for your mentoring programs? And the answer could be, Lindsay, the reason I came to this session is because I want ideas. But what are we currently doing? Do all brand new teachers get a mentor? If they're just brand new to teaching, do they get a mentor? What does it look like in your districts where you're currently at? Come on, Eleanor. I appreciate looking at your gorgeous face. So, all right, we're open to some new ideas. Thank you, Brandy, for throwing that in the chat. Thank you, Eleanor. Pretty inconsistent. All teachers should have mentors, but what that looks like at different schools is wildly different. Yeah, when you've got some site-based stuff too, and you leave it up to principals, right? It's like, all right, I want this person to be paired with this person. So I'm going to share what we used to do and then what we morphed to based on feedback. This is just one, obviously, model to use, but I'm just, going to share some ideas and things for you to consider and think about. So when I inherited the mentoring program, when I was director of PD and then transitioned into being the assistant for teaching and learning, this is what it looked like. For our induction, which was at the beginning of the year, it was 2 days for all brand new first year hires with 4 topics, one size fits all approach. In one of those days, anybody who got a mentor had lunch with their mentor. So the mentor and protege got paired together. And at the time, only brand new teachers, brand new to teaching, so in their very first year of teaching, were paired with a mentor. Let me give you some context and background. So in that district, we hired anywhere from 200 to 300 brand new teachers a year. And we maybe had 50 to 100 that were just brand new to teaching, right? And we didn't have the bench built big enough for us to have 300 mentors to pair with anybody that was a new hire. And so that was what that kind of looked like. And then for our teachers who were coming into year 2 that stuck with us and we call it being asked back to the party. So they were asked back to the party for a second year. They had 1 day of induction in August. And that was part of the collective bargaining agreement. So everyone had to come, they got paid for that time. That's what that looked like. For mentors, there was an application and selection process. And throughout the year, there was a bi-monthly training and monthly and weekly meetings between the mentor and the protege. And proteges met with mentors ongoing and then came to district level PD every month. So that's what I inherited. So for that very first year, that plan was already set in motion. I wanted to see how that would work and then gather feedback before I made any drastic changes. Based on that first year, here was what I felt, and based on feedback and reflection, I felt needed tweaking. At induction, 2 days wasn't enough time to get through all of the things that everybody needed. So when I say what everybody needed, it was like, all right, the curriculum directors needed to be able to go through and teach everybody about all of the curriculum and resources and those sorts of things. They're like, Lindsay, we need time. And then the people who needed to do insurance and benefits, they were like, Lindsay, we need time. And then the principals were like, Lindsay, we need time. And so I kept getting well, Lindsay, we need time. And it's like, well, I can't fit all of the time that everybody needs into 2 days. And so that was a bit of feedback. The other bit of feedback that I heard as I was gathering feedback throughout that year was a one-size-fits-all approach doesn't necessarily work because we have such a varied group. We were a K-12 district, 28,000 students, 1,600 staff members. And the PD approach that was taken was the social workers and the psychs and the brand new first grade teacher and the brand new high school teacher all pretty much got the same thing. And so we differentiate for our students. And so the question was, why aren't we differentiating for our teachers? So that was kind of an end in mind as I embarked on making some substantial shifts. Like, how could I get at what everybody needed? For mentors, the feedback was, we have too much time where we're in meetings. And what happens, the feedback that I got with some principals was, once a mentor, always a mentor. And there wasn't a process put into place for what happens if a veteran teacher who's been a mentor for quite some time has some performance issues. Should they continue to be a mentor? And so that was something I needed to tuck back into the back of my head. And for proteges, our brand new teachers, was that it was a one-size-fits-all approach, that there was a lack of voice and choice in the topics that they could select to go to. Everybody had to go to everything, as well as there wasn't some built-in time for just-in-time supports and like what's coming up, popping in for that. And so that's kind of what needed some tweaking and why it needed tweaking. So all that to say, I'm gonna share, I'm gonna stop sharing actually for a second so that I can share some things. When you get these slide decks, let me give you my caveat. My caveat is anything that you can have access to, I will likely give access to. If something's been blocked for some reason, it could be because I'm sharing it from like my previous role. So what I would ask is if there's something specific that you want, reach out to me. I'm going to give you my contact information. Don't just say, hey, share this with me, because it could be like two people twice removed from when I actually created these things. And they're going to like be like, what in the world? Who are these people who are asking for these things? So if I gave rights, feel free to use, abuse, make copies of. If I didn't and you want something, just shoot me an email and I'll say, yes, hey, I'm happy to reach out on your behalf, or nope, that's just something that we don't have access to anymore. So that being said, that was my little caveat. Let me share my screen. Hold please. All right, so this is what I had gotten, right? This was the agenda. This is something I believe that I opened up. So you can feel free to use and abuse this, but this is kind of where we wound up going. So this is obviously kind of some background information. That first day when we revamped it, this was our first go around at giving some voice and choice, right? The topics at the beginning of the day was like, everybody needs to know these things. There really isn't differentiation when it comes to this. Like, you need to know what HR documents are. It doesn't matter if you're a high school teacher versus an elementary teacher, that didn't matter. Everybody needs to know insurance and benefits. Everybody needs to know systems. Like, how do I put in for a guest teacher? Or how am I getting paid? Or those sorts of things. And so those were some choice sessions where people kind of rotated through those things. That was the beginning of the very first day. Also, like, how do I get my computer and just log on? Then they had some lunch, which was, we worked with some sponsors to get some of that subsidized. And then in the afternoon of that first day, we differentiated by level. But at the time, that's when, this was pre-COVID, when we were going one-to-one. And it's like, all right, well, what does digital learning environment look like here in our district? And so we did that, as well as MST is the special education system that our special education teachers, social workers, those sorts of people's case manager, they needed to know how to use that system. So I took all of the information that everybody needed and said, hey, Jonas, we need time for this and this and this, and tried to build out a schedule that worked. The second day of new teacher induction for everybody looked a little bit like this. This was our lead, was our union. So they came to come and talk about what does it mean to be part of a union? What are those expectations? And then we went and did some more rotation of sessions, professionalism in 2018. So this is a while ago, which really just was how not to get fired in our district, like what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. We made it real fun, but that was like you can't do naughty things with children conversation, and you need to come dressed to work appropriately conversation. That's what happened during that session. Safety in our schools, we had a safety officer in our school that just came to talk about, like, why do we have the safety protocols, processes, and procedures in place, and what does that look like, as well as who's who in District 300. So that was everyone from the chief academic office side. And we did some fun bingo, and it's like, all right, here's who our director of social studies is and why you need to know them. Here's who Lindsay Jonas is and why you need to know her. And we made it kind of fun. We know at the beginning of the year that it's very overwhelming. It's like drinking from a fire hose. And so we tried to chunk that a little bit better. And so those were the things that happened on that beginning part of that second day. And then in the afternoon of that second day, it was like, all right, here are the brand new people. And we said, all right, all PE teachers, you're going to go with the director of PE and health, and you're going to go and learn all of the things that you need to do. You've got half a day to do that. Could be anything from what does assessment look like in our district? What does the media center look like? And that changed based on the hiring that we had for that time. And then on the last day, so then we went to a 3-day model. It was who's who in ed services. And this was all differentiated choice. So these were, 7 or 8 different topics. And we said, all right, here are all of the things. We gave a description of each session and said to all new hires, we trust you to make good decisions on what it is you need to know and learn more about. So highlight and do, just like if you were going to go to a conference, pick the sessions that you want to go to. And that last day was all about voice and choice. And so that's kind of what we went to. And then this was, we went to a 4-day model. So on that last day, that was iReady, which was a big system that we were transitioning to. There was some dual language. We're a big dual language district. And so we went from a 2-day model to a 4-day model. And that worked out great. Of course, there were conversations with our collective bargaining unit to say, hey, you're asking for these things. We want to give that to you. Here's what we're thinking that might look like. What questions can I answer about where we were and what we went to? And that could be nothing, and that's fine. But I want to pause and give some space for questions about induction. Good question, Eleanor. So the question for those of you watching this recording is, was there a mentorship piece before the new induction process? So we started with, I guess I'll talk about the life cycle of what does all look like. So I considered induction the beginning of the life cycle of the induction and mentoring process. There's obviously cyclical work that needs to happen with that. But yes, I inherited an induction process, but through feedback, it was made very clear, like 2 days wasn't cutting it. We need to expand this a little bit more. So I'll continue on in that. I don't know, Eleanor, if that answered your question or not, but I'll continue to talk through kind of the life cycle of all of these pieces. So there's the induction process, which we called induction, which was really more of like onboarding, right? So like, you're brand new, it's the very beginning of the year, it's August, what does that look like? All brand new teachers got that. And then the mentoring process, which went throughout the next, in my district, 2 years, we were part of the 2-year process, looked a little bit different, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. I'm wondering now, as we go on to kind of the next phase, who in your district currently serves as a mentor? Meaning, is it, and who selects them? Like, is there a process by which they get selected? Are they voluntold? Is it all handled at the building level? Does it funnel up through the district level? Who currently in your district is a mentor? Is it somebody who has to have tenure? Is it just somebody who has to have a pulse? What does that look like for you? Volunteered, voluntold. We love that voluntold, right? Tenured, done at the building level. Thank you, Sandy. 30 more seconds for people to type. Mostly instructional teacher leaders. It's a position that someone has to apply for. Thank you for that. So I would say probably, I don't know, 7 or 8 months ago, I did a webinar, podcast, I don't know what they were calling it, for Ed Week, where we, me and a couple of people from across the country got together to talk about different varying induction and mentoring programs. And a lovely woman that was on part of the panel that I was a part of was from South Carolina, and they had a full-time teacher released to be the mentor. And so that was just a different model that I was like, oh, that would be amazing. But it looked a little bit different than the programs that I was pretty much a part of. Principal assigning a veteran teacher. So thank you for everyone who shared. Let's talk more about what that could and or should look like, or just some options, right? So let me go and share a portion of my screen with you. Are we there again? Give me a thumbs up if you can see it. Say all about mentors on your screen. Maybe, maybe not. Jennifer, I see your face. Do you see my screen where it says all about mentors? Beautiful. Okay. So what we transitioned to was this. an application process for mentors to apply to be teachers or to apply to be a mentor in our district. It's a paid position, it's a stipended position. When somebody applied, there was a series of questions. I'll share the survey that we kind of put together to ask for people. Typically, they were tenured teachers. They needed to have an excellent rating. So we use the Danielson framework. So they needed to get an excellent in at least domains 2 or 3, because that was the professional practice side of things. They needed to be vetted through their principal. So when it was time for me to start kind of going through that process, which was typically done in February, I'd push it out to all of the staff to say, okay, anybody interested in being a mentor? I held a mentor recruitment meeting, as well as talked about the application process and what that looked like. I gathered all of that. I had a closing period, and then sent to all of the 27 principals across the district, here are all of the people who have applied to be a mentor. Do you feel like I would be good to continue them on in the selection process? The selection process then had an application and then an interview process where people who were current mentors, as well as principals and or assistant principals, would do small group interviews just to see, because it's very different. Like, you could be a really good teacher, but that doesn't mean that you would be a really good mentor. Like, you could be really great with kids, but that doesn't mean that you can relay that to working with adults. And so we tailored that interview process to, like, talk about a time when you gave somebody some advice or struggled to work through a situation with a colleague or those sorts of things. So that was part of the process. Then there was some training, and typically we didn't not pair mentors if you were interested, but if you were somebody who were like, they maybe need a little bit of work, we had them go through the training process, and then I reserved the right to kind of pair them with a mentor, not that year. So just because you wanted to be a mentor also didn't mean that you were going to be a mentor and on any given year, because it really just kind of depended on how we matched you. So let me talk about how we matched in my district. In my district, we tried to match like buildings first, like buildings and like grade levels. It was more important for us to partner somebody with somebody who was similar in like a grade level band-ish than necessarily the same building, because there were some buildings that didn't have any mentors. So I'd rather you at least have a good grade level band and be like at that same level. So an elementary person wasn't paired with a high school person. Also, you already have colleagues in your own building and in your PLC. So like being third grade teacher, you already had a third grade team that you were working with. So that was kind of like the hierarchy of how I made those matches. So that was part of that matching process. Then for mentors, we did an ongoing support and development. There were meetings that they had to go to where we talked about what does a good coaching conversation look like? What are, like, month by month, what are the things that you probably should be going over with your proteges? And then we went to a revamped reapplication process. So every 3 years, you needed to reapply to be a mentor so that you could go through those things again, which addressed those, like, what happens if a veteran teacher's performance slips types of things. So again, you had to reapply, say you were reinterested. It went back out to principals to say, yep, I agree that they still should be a mentor, and go through that process again. So I went from this approach, which was mentors met once every couple of months from 4 to 6 p.m. So 2 hours, which was kind of agnostic of what level you were at. I'm going to talk about what it went to in a second, because it kind of addresses some of these issues. So we went from this to this. So year 1 mentors and year 2 mentors are 2 different things. So if you're working with a first year teacher, they had a different set of curriculum, if you will, scope and sequence that we went through versus a year 2. Like year 1's all about survival and learning the systems of our district. Year 2, we delved more into like a lesson study where you had to record a lesson and you were with more of a cohort, a smaller group of like 5 or 6 people where you got feedback on your teaching and those sorts of things. So when I say year 1 and year 2, that's what I mean. So we went from 6 mandatory meetings a year for all of our mentors to 4. It was also differentiated by levels. So we had K through 12, and our high school teachers started earliest in the morning. Elementary teachers started earliest in the morning, and secondary started a little bit later. And so when you see from 3 to 4:30, these were my elementary mentors, so K5, pre-K5. And then from 4 to 5:30 were my secondary mentors because they were a little bit later in the day. There was a little bit of overlap in time here. And so from 4 to 4:30, I scheduled, so I was the one running these meetings. I scheduled that time to be something that was for all of the group. So everybody who was a mentor was going to learn this information because we were all together. And then I staggered what I did with my elementary and secondary an hour on the front end and the back end. So while I needed to be there a little bit longer, they needed to be there a little bit less. So they went from a 2-hour meeting to an hour and a half meeting that was differentiated for them and what they needed for their time. And then what I did with that freed up time that they had, so they were doing 6 2-hour meetings. Now they're doing 4-ish meetings. I gathered some of that time that I had already had. So in a brand new teacher in their brand new mentor in their first year of mentoring, I gathered some of that time so that I met with them on their very own, right? Because I had some people who had been mentors for 10 years, and that looks a lot different from somebody who, this is my very first year mentoring. So this is what that schedule looks like. And then it honored the previous mentors' time, and it gave me a little bit more time to train those new mentors. So that's the model that we went to. So I call it the ADA model. We went from that application and training, ongoing support and development, to that mentor reinstatement. And here's what that looked like. I talked a little bit about it, and I'm going to go real fast into this. They had to have had a proficient or better in their past 3 years. They needed to have excellent ratings in components 2 and 3. They had to have a recommendation from their current supervisor. And that was all done through Google Docs or Google Forms, so real quick and easy. And then 2 recommendations from other colleagues, as well as application questions and that interview process. In here, in all of your resources, and I'm not going to read these to you because you've got them, feel free to beg, borrow, and steal. We did a 15-minute interview. Here were the questions that we asked, so you can use them if you want, or tweak them, or don't use them. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about that training. So after a mentor gets selected, they're brand new. We did 2 sessions of training for 3 hours each, and then you saw that we went through 2 other times throughout that first year. But really, I used the learning management system to put all of the resources that all of the mentors could see and use. So I went through, and by training, here's where you find it. Here's how you log all of your hours. You had to log the time that you met with your protege, and they had to be on track with all of that. Where to find resources, how to build skills as a mentor. What does good questioning look like? What's the difference between telling and asking? When do you need to be more firm versus when do you need to be reflective? Those sorts of things. What that matching process looked like. We did a deep dive into the Danielson framework and how to conduct an observation, because that was part of the 2-year mentoring process, was getting an observation from your mentor before your principal came in when it was scary, right? So like you could get that feedback. I did a mentor panel, which a new mentor could ask the mentor panel anything. How do they get paid? What does that look like? What do I do with a struggling protege? How do I maintain confidentiality? What does that look like? And then scenarios. So that was what was in that 2-session training. Feel free to beg, borrow, and steal. That ongoing support and development, we had those 2 new mentor only meetings where we talked about really that they were their own PLC. What does support look like? They brought their own questions and scenarios and gave that on there. I'm going to bring you to, but you can feel free to take a look at this. This is just a typical agenda for what that could and or should look like. Just put it in here as another resource for you to be able to have. Okay. Every 4 years, they needed to reapply, and they needed to get recommendations all over again. So we went through that. So I'm going to stop and pause for a moment because time is flying by. Any questions, thoughts, ahas, takeaways on mentors and what that process looked like? Okay, seeing none, we're going to get back to it because time is flying by when we're having fun. So let me share my screen again. So in my district, all first-year teachers got a mentor. Second-year teachers got a mentor. They may or may not have gotten their second-year mentor the same person as their first. And I learned at the end of the first year to ask for a lot of feedback, like, hey, we went from a one-on-one or one-on-two mentor protege kind of relationship to in the second year, more of a cohort model. And so it might be 1 to 5 or 6 people in year 2. At the end of the first year, I always ask, like, hey, if you had the opportunity to keep your mentor this year, would you? I asked the mentor the same thing. If you kept your protege, would you? Or would you like to mix things up? And then when I was making matches and building those cohorts for the second year, I took all of that feedback into everything when I put those together. And then I also oversaw the evaluation process in the district and had a really good relationship with our union. And so anybody who was on we called it a support plan, but it wasn't a formalized support plan, but anybody who was in year 3 or 4 and principals were kind of on the fence and really kind of keeping an eagle eye on those people, we offered for them to get a mentor. And that could be, they aren't brand new to teaching, but they're struggling and they need someone. They always got offered at least and could refuse, but hey, we want to give you the best chance for support and continuing to make it on in our district. And so we felt like a mentor was appropriate for them. So let's shift to proteges, right? So proteges or mentees, whatever it is you want to call them. This is what we went from to. So everybody went to a monthly meeting for an hour and a half. And it was a one-size-fits-all approach. This was the topic of the month. We're going to learn all about the evaluation process. Everyone's going to come. And whether or not that pertained to you, because it was in the collective bargaining agreement, you had to come. What I got was a lot of, but Lindsay, I need to coach and I am a coach and I can't make it this time. And it turned into a lot of me trying to like figure out who was going to be here. And okay, well, you need to make up this because it was in our collective bargaining agreement and they got paid for it. You need to make this up. And how are you going to make up your time? And it was just really a lot of headache and chaos and like mass confusion. I was like, there's a lot of opportunity for improvement here. So at the end of the first year, I asked these things. What do we feel we need to cover at our last mentee meeting? Looking back, if you were to plan a year 1 program, what topics do you think are beneficial? What's working with the current status of our mentee meetings? What's not working? What are any topics that you feel like you need to discuss? If I were to go to a second year program, I'd want my mentor again. And then what would you like to learn as a new teacher? If you click on this, you'd be able to see all of this feedback. I'm not going to go through that, but you can see what people said. So that then turned into my first iteration of this. So we went to a model which was for elementary teachers, for secondary teachers, and then I split out into ed services. So that's psychs, social workers, case managers, special education teachers. And then also not necessarily a one-size-fits-all approach. So for us, they needed to attend 7 topics throughout the year. There were some that everybody attended, where you see this must attend. Everybody needed to attend that topic. Like, you need to know how you're going to get evaluated in our district, and you need to know what good professional practice looks like. So you got to come to that one. You need to come for when it comes time for evaluation, what that looks like, how you're going to get evaluated in domains 1 and 4. You need to come to that. The rest you could choose, and you could choose to come to more, but you minimally had to come to 7 topics throughout the year. And so mentors and proteges came up with a plan. And when you're coaching cheerleading, all right, well, maybe in November, I'm not going to be able to make it to those, but what's your plan for that? And how are you going to come up with making up your full 7 that you need to come up with? And it took a lot of responsibility off of me and put it onto them. And I didn't have to answer I'm not going to make it to this session time. So this is, feel free to beg, borrow, and steal. You can see all of the different topics. Oh, remember when I told you that mentors also got some time freed up because they didn't have to come to 6 meetings a year. They only had to come to 4. That then morphed into, well, I gave you time back because I listened to you. You need to pick one of these topics that you want to facilitate. Could be by yourself, could be with a partner, could be with a group of 3. At the end of the year, I gave up all of the topics and said, all right, you need to put your name on 3 sticky notes. And then I worked with the directors kind of over these areas to kind of match people with their strengths to say that they needed to, in advance, send me what their presentations were going to be. So it turned into less of me having to figure out all of these topics and using the genius that I had with all of the mentors and pairing people. And it worked really well for us. A little bit of like figuring out logistics on the front end, but on the back end, I just could schedule out my whole year, meet with people. And then if people didn't do a good job, I could give them that feedback. So that's just another thing. And then I wanted to share also kind of on, this is what we tried that first year, and then that morphed again here another year. So what topics were working? How did I need to maneuver things? Just wanted to share with you all so that you got some topics that people could select from and between. Ooh, let me give you a second to digest this before we wrap things up in the next 4 minutes. I'm of course not the be all end all for everything new teacher mentoring. If you don't subscribe to or check out the new teacher center, they have tons of resources out there. I'm gonna pull them up here right here in my office for you, like first year teacher survival kit and 21st Century Mentors Handbook. Like these were the guides that I used to be able to pull these resources to create the curriculum for the first 2 years of the program. Like there's a plethora of resources in here. So if you're not using those, I'd highly recommend. But keeping it all straight. So one thing, there's a sense of accountability here, right? So we had what's called an attendance verification form. You'll have access to this. You can beg, borrow, steal. But every new teacher got observed twice from their mentor. They needed to say when they were getting evaluated by their evaluator. They also had to go and observe classroom teachers once a semester. We had money in our budget to get subs. This was pre-COVID, but we still get to do that. We scaled back on it a little bit with the lack of guest teachers. And then there was a mentor-mentee reflection that was due each quarter, as well as like, all right, here are the number of contact hours that I need to get. So that's that attendance verification form. There's plenty of Google surveys, as well as the repository for our information. With that, I've got 2 minutes, all the time in the world, to be able to open it up to you and answer any questions that you might have. Well, you have a plethora of resources. You've got with the resources, my contact information. But I'd like to say thank you for your time today. I know that was a quick hour. Time flies when you're having fun. But if you need anything, please feel free to reach out. That's my personal cell phone. Feel free to text ljonas@iaspa.org. If you shoot me an email, I'm happy to share any resources that you might have. Book titles, yes. The 21st Century Mentors Handbook. And the first year teacher's survival kit. Yes. Okay. Eleanor, great question. So I have some feedback for you. So I know that Monica Schrader, who is the deputy superintendent in a school district here in Illinois, but she's also she's not the Region 2 rep for ASPA anymore. She's the president-elect for ASPA, did a presentation on mentoring for principals and central office. Like, she did a great presentation on that. And I am confident that she would love to share resources with you. I believe that she also presented at ASPA. So those things might already exist on ASPA's resources. Maybe Kelly knows. I see her talking.
I'm so sorry.
It's all right. Kelly.
Yes.
So one of the questions was about mentoring for other roles like central office staff, principals. And I mentioned to Eleanor that Monica, our president-elect, did an ASPA presentation. And I don't remember if she also did a webinar on mentoring for principals and those sorts of things. So do you know if those exist somewhere on the ASPA site?
She actually did a session today on mentoring for this one. So it'll be part of your recordings. If you did not go to that session, that was the first session of the day this morning. She did one. I'm not 100% sure about a webinar, but we do have a lot of webinars on mentoring. And I'm pretty sure, I'm going to just do a really quick test here really quick. I think you can go to a couple of places I want to send you. Recorded webinars. In fact, Lindsay, are you okay if I show my screen?
Of course.
Okay. So a really good idea is if you go to recorded webinars, and by the way, guys, that's under resources, webinars, recorded webinars for ASPA members. So keep in mind, you have to be a member. These are all of the past webinars. And a lot of times we might be able to do a search for mentor. You got to be very specific. Sometimes it's a touchy one, but here are some webinars that happened. This one was cultivating employee retention through mentoring. So you can see that this is a good option for you if you're looking for more on a particular topic. Again, these are all free. I like to point that out as well. The other place I want to send you is under member benefits. So if you are a member and you go to member benefits under professional development resource documents, these are all the past events that we are done selling, right? So we've had the events, we've sold them, we're done. Now we put them on for free as a member benefit. And you can go, these are all categorized as our standards that we have, our PHCLE standards. So there is some in here. And some of them, by the way, FYI, are session recordings. So there are some things in there, and you could probably find something or another under here under mentoring, because obviously it's a pretty popular topic. Does that help?
Perfect.
Yeah. So I know
All right.
anytime I get a chance to demo the website and tell everybody where all the goody stuff is, it's hard to show that. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for your
Thank you.
time, and
Thank
enjoy the
you.
rest of your day.